The night air was heavy with rain, each drop hammering against the cracked asphalt as Alex Mercer stood motionless at the intersection. His phone trembled in his hand, the voice on the other end cutting through the storm like a blade. "If you don't choose now, Lily dies." The words reverberated in his skull, stripping away the comfort of hesitation. Alex's breath quickened, misting in the damp air, his pulse drumming like war drums in his chest. He had always believed justice meant patience, reason, and truth. Yet this was no courtroom. This was a battlefield of morality where seconds counted more than principles. His grip tightened, the screen's glow reflecting in his desperate eyes. He whispered, "Why her? Why now?" But the voice on the phone responded with silence before hanging up. The world collapsed into the pounding storm, leaving Alex stranded in chaos. Memories of betrayal rushed in, Victor Hale's confident smirk, a broken promise sealed with blood, and the fragile innocence of Lily's laughter fading into the abyss. The rain drenched his coat, soaking through layers as if the storm itself was judging him. Alex's mind raced. Was revenge the only path left? Was justice ever real? Or had he been chasing illusions while predators thrive? He slammed his palm against the steering wheel of his parked car, trembling, knowing that this moment, this ultimatum, would define every breath of his future. His voice broke, low and raw. "I will not let you win, Hale. Not this time." The narrator whispered above the storm. In choosing revenge, Alex had already set fire to the fragile remnants of his soul. The storm followed Alex into his car, the air thick with his panic. The phone sat silent now, but the echo of the voice gnawed at him. He gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, staring at the child's drawing. Lily's innocent strokes of sunshine mocked the darkness around him. "Hold on, Lily," he whispered, though doubt threatened to shatter him. His eyes darted to the map, pinned to the passenger seat, red circles marking Hale's territory. Revenge was no longer a question of morality. It had become survival, a twisted race against a man who thrived in shadows. The narrator's voice cut in like a solemn truth. Sometimes, to fight evil, one must risk becoming it. The windshield wipers screeched, smearing the storm into distorted shapes. Alex's eyes were bloodshot, locked on the circles drawn on the map. Hale's name written in jagged letters, blurred in the damp. The weight of memory pressed harder. The handshake, the betrayal, the smile that promised ruin. Alex muttered through clenched teeth, "You want to destroy her like you destroyed me." The narrator's voice echoed, "Each step into vengeance carves another scar into the soul, and Alex's scars were only beginning." A horn blared as Alex pulled into traffic, tires skidding on wet pavement. His chest burned, torn between fear and determination. The city's skyline loomed, lights distorted by rain, each tower like a judge watching his descent. He whispered, "I'll find you, Hale." The narrator whispered with gravity, "When revenge is chosen, the path narrows until all exits vanish," and Alex had already crossed the point of no return. Alex turned into a dim side street, the safe house address scrawled in ink echoing in his mind. He parked beneath a flickering lamp, silence thick as the storm began to fade. His reflection in the rearview mirror stared back, hollow and haunted. He whispered, "If revenge takes me, so be it." The narrator lingered, "Vengeance feeds on hope, and once consumed, leaves nothing but ruin." Alex closed the apartment door and let the city's thunder fade to a dull pulse behind the walls. The living room glowed with sticky notes and string, a nervous system of secrets. He studied the web and felt it study him back. The narrator observed how fear and purpose can share the same heartbeat. Alex said, "Every path leads to Victor Hale." He traced a red thread to a photograph, then another to a ledger, and another to a street where trust went to die. Doubt tapped at the edges like rain on glass. He pictured Lily's drawing and swallowed the tremor in his throat. The room smelled of cold coffee and wet wool, a shrine to unfinished choices. He wanted law, not blood, yet the law had looked away. Alex said, "If the rules protect wolves, what use are rules?" The clock ticked with the lazy cruelty of power left unchallenged. The narrator weighed the cost of action against the cost of silence, and found both heavy. He stood very still, and listened for the smallest truth inside the storm. Judge Eleanor Brooks sat across a scarred table, hands folded like a verdict she hated to deliver. The courthouse cafeteria hummed with tired voices and fluorescent buzz. She watched Alex with the ache of someone who once believed in perfect edges. Brooks said justice demands patience. Her eyes confessed to old bargains she could not forgive. Alex said, patience is a luxury Lily can't afford. The narrator traced the fracture between law and mercy across their faces. She leaned forward and lowered her voice to where truth trembles. Brooks said, do not become what you chase. She slid a note with a case number, a quiet door in a noisy maze. Alex stared at the paper and felt the floor tilt under conviction. He wanted a light, bright enough to burn the rot out clean. The light he had was a match in wind. Maya Chen met Alex in a storage room that smelled of paper and thunder. Boxes rose like mute witnesses around a folding table. She opened a laptop, and the screen lit her face with stubborn fire. Maya said, these transfers bury people, not money. She showed a ledger that pulsed with names and dates like a heartbeat gone wrong. Alex said, Hale sits in the center like a spider. The narrator mocked how idealism can make a person brave and breakable at once. Maya said, if we publish, the system hits back hard. A pause lingered like a bruise. Alex said, I will take the hit. She nodded, not relieved, only decided. Outside, the storm pressed its ear to the window, hungry for the first crack. Elias Ward arrived with the silence of someone who prefers rooms that keep secrets. The parking garage held the smell of rubber and rain, lights buzzing like nervous flies. He leaned on a column and watched Alex the way chess watches pawns. Elias said, you need access more than anger. He produced a keycard from a pocket that never ran out of favors. Alex said, what do you want in return? The narrator knew every gift has a tail. Elias smiled without heat and said, use it before dawn, then we talk. The card felt heavier than 2 ounces in Alex's palm. Opportunity and trap often share a face in this city. Elias walked away, and his footsteps refused to echo. Back home, Alex played a recording that had slept too long in a hard drive. The voices were calm in the way wolves are calm. A signature, a promise, a silence paid for with daylight. He watched Hale shake hands with a man wearing the city like a mask. Alex said, you built this with smiles. The narrator noted the cruelty of polished sin. He paused the frame where Hale's eyes flinched at the word risk. That flinch described a map more honest than any ledger. Alex said, this ends now. His reflection hovered on the screen like a ghost asking for purpose. He turned off the light and let the room decide what kind of man he was. The data center breathed cold and even, a temple of whirring devotion. Alex flashed the stolen keycard and felt the lock yield like a throat. The night guard watched rain chew the loading bay and did not look back. The narrator measured the distance between need and crime, and found none. Alex said in and out, before the servers notice me. He moved through aisles of lights that blinked like nervous saints. A terminal waited with blank patience, and he fed it the right lie. The ledger opened like a wound that never closed. He copied files while the clock put teeth on every second. Somewhere, a camera blinked and forgot him. Somewhere, a choice shaped itself like a blade. Maya stood before her division chief, who wore authority like fitted armor. Fluorescence flattened everything into a single, tired color. He said, close the file, Maya. She said, the file is people. He pressed a smile that never reached his eyes. The narrator mocked how jobs can turn into cages with invisible bars. Maya said, if I walk away, they vanish for good. He said, think of your future. She felt the words scrape against bone. Maya said, I am. The room held its breath for the consequence. Paper rustled like a nervous animal in a trap. Elias waited in a diner that never closed, where coffee kept secrets and clocks lied. He stirred nothing and watched the door. Alex arrived with rain on his shoulders and a question in his eyes. Elias said, "The keycard sang for you." Alex said, "What chorus do you expect in return?" The narrator let the grill hiss, underline the bargain. Elias said, "Access buys access. When the time comes, open a door for me." Alex hated how simple corruption sounded when dressed as trade. He nodded once, too sharp to be safe. The waitress refilled cups and did not ask what they were selling. In the docks, rain stitched the night together with silver thread. Alex planted a device under a truck that smelled of money and fear. He thought of ledges that turned people into inventory. The narrator warned how righteous fire spreads without aim. A forklift lurched and a worker stepped where danger waited. Alex hissed, "Move," then waved with frantic urgency. The worker paused, frowned, and stepped back just as a crate slid hard. The device beeped like a heart that chose to keep beating. Alex said, "No casualties, no headlines, just truth." Judge Brooks opened her office safe and retrieved a file that smelled like old rain. The pages carried a decade of dust and one unforgiven choice. Brooks said, "I buried this to keep a door open for better cases." Alex heard the confession like a bell that cracked. The narrator witnessed how compromise does not end, it migrates. She set the file on the desk, and the room dimmed around the paper. Brooks said, "Do not follow me into this quiet ruin." Alex said, "Then help me find the exit." She nodded, exhausted and alive. Somewhere, the city leaned closer to listen. The elevator opened a glass and sky, and Victor Hale waited with a dossier that looked like a verdict. The narrator felt the room tilt as memory approached in a tailored suit. Hale said, "Sit, Alex." Alex remained standing, rain still clinging to his collar like doubt. Hale set the folder down and tapped a yellowed photo of a wrecked sedan. Hale said, "7 years ago, I paid to keep your name off a morgue tag." Alex's breath thinned as the image dragged smoke and sirens from the past. Hale said, "You were bait in someone else's hunt." The narrator counted the cracks that truth makes in anger. Alex said, "You don't rescue people, you invest in liabilities." Hale smiled with grief he did not own. He slid a hospital bill across the glass. Hale said, "I called in favors, and you kept breathing." The room chilled as survival and debt shook hands. Alex said, "If I owe you, say the price." Hale said, "Stop chasing me and chase the hand behind me." The narrator listened for mercy and heard only leverage. Hale pressed a button, and a wall screen woke with call logs, maps, and timestamps. The narrator watched the timeline braid into a trap that felt deliberate. Hale said, "The kidnapping is theater." Alex said, "Lily is not a prop." Hale zoomed to a tower of repeating numbers like a signature carved into fog. Hale said, "Whoever staged this knew your habits, your roots, your grief." The city outside flickered like a lie rehearsing. Alex said, "Name them." Hale said, "I would if I could." The cursor hovered over a redacted block that shone like a dare. The narrator weighed what it means when villains admit ignorance. Hale said, "They needed you furious. They needed me exposed." Alex's pulse steadied around a colder idea. He said, "Then we are both bait." Silence settled, heavy as wet wool. Hale said, "Choose your enemy with care." The room's hum sounded like a fuse. The elevator doors closed and revealed Elias Ward leaning on a marble pillar like a shadow that had learned to smile. The narrator noted how coincidence keeps appointments when money writes the calendar. Elias said, "You two play loudly." Alex said, "How did you get past security?" Elias lifted the same keycard Alex had used and twirled it like a coin. Elias said, "Access gravitates." Alex felt the day's scaffolding creak. Elias said, "You want answers? Open the server in the old exchange." Hale's name flickered across Alex's tongue and died there. The air smelled of steel and polished lies. Elias said, "Time is a tide. Take it at the turn." Alex said, Why help me? Elias's eyes softened, then shuddered. Elias said, because the truth I need survives only if you do. The narrator traced the outline of a bargain dressed as concern. Maya Chen stood in an archive alcove where air tasted of paper and static. The narrator felt the building breathe with secrets that never saw daylight. She traced audit logs and found a hand that wrote like a mirror. Maya said, these edits point away from Hale by pointing too perfectly. She pulled an older backup and watched the forgery dissolve. Names emerged like bones after rain. Maya said, this is not cleanup, it's choreography. Her phone buzzed with a blocked call that she refused. The fluorescent hum sounded like an argument, losing politely. She whispered to the empty stacks, hold, Alex, hold. The cursor blinked with urgent patience. Maya said, if I go public tonight, the blowback could bury us. The narrator weighed the cost and found it paid in breath. She exported files and felt the server hesitate like a witness. Judge Eleanor Brooks unlocked a drawer that she had promised never to touch again. The narrator sensed the gravity reserved for vows that failed under weather. She placed a sealed affidavit on the desk and stared at her reflection in the glass. Brooks said, I saw this signature once, when I still believed procedure could outlast hunger. The ink curled in a pattern that history would recognize by scar. Alex said, who? Brooks said, a fund that owned everything and answered to no room with windows. Her voice did not rise, it sank. The city's sirens passed like arguments already decided. Brooks said, if you pull this thread, the cloth becomes string. Alex said, then let it become string. The narrator heard the sound of a net unraveling around powerful feet. Brooks slid the affidavit forward and chose to be haunted again. The high-rise office blurred beneath thunderheads as the city wore its lights like armor. The narrator braced for the tilt that comes before a fall. Alex entered with a breath that remembered fire. Victor Hale stood by the window and did not step back. Hale said, you think I'm the wall. I'm only a door. Alex raised the flash drive like a warrant. Alex said, this opens the floors beneath you. Hale's laugh was too thin to be brave. He motioned toward a safe and did not touch it. Hale said, I cannot outrun what is coming. The wind pressed rain against the glass until the skyline changed shape. Alex said, you made choices, so will I. The narrator counted the seconds that decide a life and found them shrinking. The room waited to see which word would become a weapon. Hale moved first, not toward the safe, but toward confession. The narrator watched him choose survival by inches. Hale said, I brokered the roots. Yes, but the purge belongs to Elias. Alex's pulse narrowed to a thin wire. Alex said, prove it. Hale pointed at a ledger stamped with an innocuous shell. Hale said, he lit the fuse to clear competitors and bury me. The storm threw white veins across the glass. The room smelled of metal and cold coffee. Alex said, you expect me to spare you because he is worse. Hale said, I expect you to weigh bodies, not myths. The words landed like coins in a broken scale. The narrator felt the moral floor give and hold at once. Maya called from a rooftop where antennas blinked like distant warnings. The narrator tracked her breath as courage bargained with consequence. Maya said, I can drop everything now, but once it's live, we cannot hide. Alex felt the weight of lilies drawing in a pocket that was not there. Alex said, do it, but give me 10 minutes. Maya said, 10 is a lifetime and a death. Her laptop screen reflected in eyes that refused to look away. She said, this will burn through walls and friends. Alex said, let it burn what should burn. The line went quiet, not empty, just decided. The city exhaled, and somewhere a door unlocked. A message arrived on Alex's phone like a heartbeat with coordinates. The narrator followed the blue dot to a warehouse that listened more than it spoke. Inside, a timer blinked on a cracked tablet, and Lily's location pulsed in red. Alex said, if this is a maze, I will still walk it. He felt rage try to steer and let resolve take the wheel. Hale watched from the doorway, a man measuring his own horizon. Hale said, "You can end me now and lose her, or you can end this and find her." The words tasted like ash and truth. Alex lowered the weapon until it felt like a tool again. He said, "We do it my way." The narrator recognized the sound of a choice that will never stop echoing. Alex opened a secure channel and streamed the ledgers, videos, and affidavits to Maya, while Hale's eyes held a calculus of regret. The narrator counted the systems that began to stir as truth entered their bloodstream. Sirens grew from rumor to shape. Alex said, "This is the end of your weather." Hale said, "Weather returns." The screen flickered with headlines being born. Alex pocketed the weapon and felt how heavy an empty hand can be. He said, "Tell me where Lily is." Hale closed his eyes and gave an address that sounded like penance. The storm outside eased without forgiving. The room stood still and chose to remember. The warehouse hummed like a sleeping animal, while truth poured through cables into daylight. Alex watched progress bars climb and felt his pulse learn a steadier beat. The narrator marked how restraint can sound louder than rage. Victor Hale stood close enough to breathe the same cold air, and kept his hands visible. Hale said, "You chose a road that leaves no trophies." Alex said, "Trophies are for men who need to forget the bodies." Sirens matured from rumor to certainty in the distance. The screen flashed green, and the last file joined the flood. Alex said, "Maya has it all now." He holstered the gun and felt the weight migrate to his chest. Hale said, "You traded revenge for witnesses." The narrator heard the line between those words blur. Outside, rain surrendered to a fine mist, and the city lifted its head to listen. Across the city, doors answered warrants with the shock of waking. The narrator followed boots through corridors where whispers once hid. Agents moved like punctuation, ending sentences written in cash. Screens in newsrooms drank the leak and turned it into language. Maya said, "We are live," her voice steady enough to pass for calm. Alex felt a small room inside his ribs, open a window. Elias Ward evaporated from every expected corner, leaving only rumors shaped like footprints. Hale said, "He always owned the angles you forgot to measure." Helicopters stitched the morning with restless thread. Alex said, "He will surface where the current needs a face." The city exhaled smoke that smelled like new paperwork. The narrator observed how justice begins with noise and survives by patience. The address Hale surrendered led to a house that pretended to be ordinary. The narrator felt the quiet ache of carpets that had never learned to scream. Alex crossed a hallway lined with staged photos and found a locked room that smelled of fear and lemons. A bolt groaned, and memory rushed in with the air. Lily sat on a cot, clutching a blanket that had not been kind. Alex said, "I'm here," and the words broke and mended in the same breath. She rose without sound and folded into him like a lost season. The clock on the wall ticked in apology. He said, "We are going home," and believed it for the length of a heartbeat. The narrator honored a rescue that arrived without applause. Outside, morning poured itself into puddles until the world remembered colors. By noon, the courthouse steps had learned 3 languages of shouting. The narrator watched Victor Hale descend a stone staircase between agents who had practiced neutral faces. Cameras gnashed and cheered, making teeth of light. Hale said, "I will answer in court," and the sentence tried on several meanings. Reporters asked questions that preferred the sound of themselves. Alex stood behind a barricade and felt no triumph arrive. He said, "Tell the truth, though the wind carried it somewhere less crowded." Hale turned once, a glance that weighed debts and futures. The cuffs flashed like brief arguments with metal. The narrator admitted how public justice needs theater, and theater needs masks. The sky stayed undecided about rain. Judge Eleanor Brooks stood before microphones wearing a silence that had trained her for years. The narrator collected the tremor she would not show. She said, "I am resigning," and the square inhaled. She named failures without hunting for excuses, and returned a badge that once felt like armor. Alex listened from the edge and counted how many lives fit in a single apology. Brooks said, "I believed compromise could be stewarded. I was wrong." Her eyes carried storms that never learned thunder. The crowd did not cheer and did not jeer. It recorded. Alex said, "Thank you," under his breath, not expecting delivery. The narrator weighed the cost of clean beginnings and found residue on every coin. Somewhere, a printer began to spit out new forms for old ghosts. Before sunrise, the rooftop took the city's confession and kept it. The narrator watched Alex lean on a rail that no longer promised safety. The wind combed the last rain from the air and left the sky pale with intention. He said, "What I spared still lives in me." The words did not ask for witnesses. Sirens faded into ordinary distance and made room for birds that believed in tomorrow by instinct. He set his phone on the ledge and let the screen go dark. The skyline returned his stare without counsel. He said mercy isn't a cure, and felt the truth settle like a stone in a pocket. The narrator offered him silence, and he accepted. Dawn climbed the buildings with soft, stubborn hands and refused to hurry. Maya's expose bloomed across screens like a storm, choosing every window. The narrator traveled the comment fields where courage and cruelty kept trading masks. Maya said, "We stand by our reporting," and her voice steadied itself on the facts. Emails arrived in stacks, some grateful like sunrise, some sharp like broken glass. A colleague said, "You will need protection," and the word tasted like debt. She looked at a photo of a woman who vanished from a ledger line and chose to remain reachable. Maya said, "If they bring heat, let them bring light." Alex texted only a single word that knew how to carry weight. He wrote, "Brave." The day answered with both applause and warning. The narrator accepted that truth's first meal is always costly. In a kitchen that remembered laughter, Lily unfolded a crumpled drawing rescued from a dashboard and a nightmare. The narrator watched colors survive what nights could not. She placed the paper on the table and added a sun that the original had forgotten. Alex said, "You kept it," and the sentence carried 1,000 unsaid lines. Lily nodded and pressed harder with the yellow crayon as if granting daylight a passport. He said, "We can frame it," then wondered if glass could hold storms without cracking. The kettle clicked and did not whistle. Lily drew a small figure holding another's hand. The narrator forgave the image for what it could not heal. The room learned a softer kind of quiet and decided to keep it for a while. The voicemail arrived with no caller ID'd and a patience that smelled like risk. The narrator listened with Alex as a familiar calm filled the room. Elias Ward said, "You chose mercy. The city will not." He let the sentence breathe until it learned new meanings. Elias said, "Doors will open for you now." Some led out, some led down. The audio clicked like a coin against glass. He said, "When you need a door, call." The message ended without goodbye, and silence returned like a professional. Alex said, "You do not disappear. You relocate." The narrator recorded the promise and filed it under weather. Outside, traffic remembered its schedules and forgot its sins. Night returned without ceremony and found Alex in the dark reflection of an idle screen. The narrator traced the outline of a face that had outlived a simpler story. He said, "Revenge did not heal me, and the glass kept his secret." He said, "Restraint did not absolve me," and the room agreed by staying still. Somewhere, paperwork advanced and headlines cooled. He imagined a ledger that listed debts no court would name. The city offered a low hum, like a tired lullaby, for complicated souls. He stood, turned off the last light, and let the window hold the stars. The narrator ended where quiet begins, with a man who chose and will keep choosing. Morning waited just out of view, patient as consequence and kind as breath.